get going. And I will share my screen. And make this bigger. I can make it bigger here. There we go. Okay. All right, we're on A Course in Miracles Manual for Teachers today. And what are the characteristics of God's teachers? The surface traits, we already read this last week. Let's skip to the next one. Trust. This is the foundation on which their ability to fulfill their function rests. Perception is the result of learning. In fact, perception is learning because cause and effect are never separated. The teachers of God have trust in the world because they have learned it is not governed by the laws the world made up. It is governed by a power that is in them, but not of them. It is the power that keeps all things safe. It is through this power that the teachers of God look on a forgiven world. When this power has once been experienced, it is impossible to trust one's own petty strength again. Who would attempt to fly with the tiny wings of a sparrow when the mighty power of an eagle has been given him? And who would place his faith in the shabby offerings of the ego when the gifts of God are laid before him? What is it that induces them to make the shift? Development of trust. First, they must go through what might be called a period of undoing. This need not be painful, but it usually is so experienced. It seems as if things are being taken away, and it is rarely understood initially that their lack of value is merely being recognized. How can lack of value be perceived unless the perceiver is in a position where he must see things in a different light? He is not yet at a point at which he can make the shift entirely internally. And so the plan will sometimes call for changes in what seem to be external circumstances. These changes are always helpful. When the teacher of God has learned that much, he goes on to the second stage. Next, the teacher of God must go through a period of sorting out. This is always somewhat difficult because having learned that the changes in his life are always helpful, he must now decide all things on the basis of whether they increase the helpfulness or hamper it. He will find that many, if not most, of the things he valued before will merely hinder his ability to transfer what he has learned to new situations as they arise. Because he has valued what is really valueless, he will not generalize the lesson for fear of loss and sacrifice. It takes great learning to understand that all things, events, encounters, and circumstances are helpful. It is only to the extent to which they are helpful that any degree of reality should be accorded them in this world of illusion. The word value can apply to nothing else. The third stage through which the teacher of God must go can be called a period of relinquishment. If this is interpreted as giving up the desirable, it will engender enormous conflict. Few teachers of God escape this distress entirely. There is, however, no point in sorting out the valuable from the valueless unless the next obvious step is taken. Therefore, the period of overlap is apt to be one in which the teacher of God feels called upon to sacrifice his own best interests on behalf of truth. He has not yet realized as yet how wholly impossible such a demand would be. He can learn this only as he actually does give up the valueless. Through this, he learns that where he anticipated grief, finds a happy lightheartedness instead. Where he thought something was asked of him, he finds a gift bestowed on him. Now comes a period of settling down. This is a quiet time in which the teacher of God rests a while in reasonable peace. Now he consolidates his learning. Now he begins to see the transfer value of what he has learned. Its potential is literally staggering. And the teacher of God is now at the point in his progress at which he sees in it his whole way out. Give up what you do not want and keep what you do. How simple is the obvious, and how easy to do. The teacher of God needs this period of respite. He has not yet come as far as he thinks. Yet when he is ready to go on, he goes with mighty companions beside him. Now he rests a while and gathers them before going on. He will not go on from here alone. The next stage is indeed a period of unsettling. Now must the teacher of God understand that he did not really know what was valuable and what was valueless. All that he really learned so far was that he did not want the valueless and that he did want the valuable. Yet his own sorting out was meaningless in teaching him the difference. The idea of sacrifice, so central to his own thought system, had made it impossible for him to judge. He thought he learned willingness, but now he sees that he does not know what the willingness is for. And now he must attain a state that may remain impossible to reach for a long, long time. He must learn to lay all judgment aside and ask only what he really wants in every circumstance. Were not each step in this direction so heavily reinforced, it would be hard indeed. And finally, there is a period of achievement. It is here that learning is consolidated. Now, what was seen as merely shadows before becomes solid gains to be counted on in all emergencies, as well as tranquil times. Indeed, the tranquility is their result, the outcome of honest learning, consistency of thought, and full transfer. This is the stage of real peace, for here is heaven's state fully reflected. From here, the way to heaven is open and easy. In fact, it is here. Who would go anywhere if peace of mind is already complete? And who would seek to change tranquility for something more desirable? What could be more desirable than this? Stop sharing there. Looks like we've got some more people who've joined. We've got Cynthia and we've got Tim and we've got Carol, which I know Carol joined before.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm showing up as my wife here, but
All right, I'll rename you.
Eric's there too.
And Eric is here. He's on, not
Yeah.
on his video.
Yeah.
He's busy doing some other things. But yeah, that's
I'm listening. I'm listening. Very intently.
Eric is listening.
One of my
Thanks.
favorite parts, especially trust.
Yes.
Trust is hard for me to have come by, so I had to work hard on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
My hair's a mess. I just got up, so it's up the screen.
Can I ask
Straighten it out. I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know, if this is trust or not, but for me, I question everything. I just don't. I read it, but I don't. I mean, sometimes I feel, especially with the lessons, like it's an indoctrination. And so I read it carefully over again. And I do. I mean, I still have my issues because I'm thinking, okay, this is indoctrinating. However, this is a good indoctrination because it's never so much an indoctrination as it is trying to break down my belief system, which is not trusting. So it's kind of like, I understand this about trust, I think in that term that you have, I think one has to ask all the time, You know, I just can't take things, I don't know, at face value, or some things I can believe, other things I question. So I don't know if for me that's what works, but I'm willing to listen, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
See, like trust can't really be developed by the fact of my will, because my will is focused on behavior, and behavior is the result of something. It's not a cause of anything. So being that my focus is on people and their behaviors and so on and so forth like that, trust was hard for me to develop that way because I was focused on their behaviors. Now, gradually that began to sort of fall away in 12-step work. And working through the steps, I began to find that they end with the same thing that the Course begins with. The Course begins by telling us we're here to be truly helpful. And Eckhart Tolle and a lot of other people that I read and had book studies with people about and all that, we're all saying pretty much the same thing. You have to find this internal purpose. Like most people in the world don't believe in a purpose, I think. Maybe they don't think about it because they don't seem to know that they have a purpose. So seeing that in people was kind of difficult. And once I realized what I was seeing, I realized that isn't the valuable part about them, which is what this talks about today. The valuable part of what I need to see about people is, do they have the ability to learn? Do they have the capacity to be able to ask for help or to do something that in fact helps them to see they're making spiritual progress? That's what I needed to see about people. So I stopped focusing so much on their behavior and their fantasy thinking and focus more on instead, what do you really want in terms of your spiritual growth? And that began to make more sense. And I could see I could begin to trust people, even what people say, even when they're very confused, when they do focus on that they need spiritual development. They actually say things that make sense.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting you use that word purpose because we were talking about today's lesson earlier. And I think today's was the first lesson, workbook lesson 37, that talks about purpose. And it says, my holiness blesses the world.
Right.
This idea contains the first glimmerings of your true function in the world, or why you are here. Your purpose is to see the world through your own holiness.
Yes, I was reading that also.
Yeah.
The tranquility thing is very important too, because that points back to the fact of earlier chapter, in chapter 19, it told us that we don't want tranquility. We want to get rid of it. When we're challenged and we're obsessed by the fact that the world is so important to us, the value of what's going on in the world is so important to us, then we forget about tranquility, and we actually don't want it. We actually want to investigate and deal with situations and circumstances that don't bring tranquility.
Yeah, they're like mutually exclusive. You know, you can't have one and have the other.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Like misery and happiness. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. No, good. Good, Eric. Yeah.
Any
Yeah,
other
I'm
thoughts?
also working with that same lesson and found myself blessing Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. That was a big one for me.
There you go.
And you know what? It didn't cost me anything. And I actually was in a state where, hey, all of us have these little egos, some of them bigger than others, but it's just a big misunderstanding. It's a misidentification with, we think that's what we are. We really do. Hey, look, I got this body. Oh yeah, right. I got this body. Oh yeah, and I got this thing that believes in the fitness of this body. That's all just a bunch of bunk. We've come here as a huge learning. It's like probably one of the places in that I've ever heard of, and I haven't heard of a lot, but where there's so many distractions. You have the false identification of the body believing in the ego believing in the body. Right there is it's a double blind. you're stuck unless you have some kind of experience or you read this book and really soak it in and understanding that, wait a minute, what have I been doing all my life? Oh my God, I've invested all this energy in taking vacations, let's say. And I love vacations, but what are we taking a vacation for? I mean, this is the vacation right here. So anyway, my holiness blesses the world, and so does yours. There's a nice bumper sticker.
Mm.
So when I talk about the obstacles to peace, I always like to mention there's several books about it. Ken Wapnick's book about the obstacles of peace, and just reading the obstacles to peace in chapter 19 also is very rewarding. It helps to open my mind to wanting to trust, to wanting to focus on what's valuable instead of what is, fantasy, made up, seeming to draw conclusions from people's behavior and circumstances and situations rather than from what's truly in their hearts. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? In paragraph 6, there's a sentence that says, when he is ready to go on, he goes with my mighty companions beside him. And I'm imagining who the course is talking about when it says that. It's probably referring to something like Jesus or the Buddha or something like that. What do you think that is?
I would say that's correct, Freddie. I think that when you finally got into that place where you've gone through that period of trying to decide what's helpful, what's not helpful, that period of settling, that period of which I know I've done that several times in my life, right? Where you've made these decisions. This is not helping me. This is hindering me. I'm making a choice to not have this in my life anymore. And then you get to this point and you're like, yes, that feels better. And then you realize, but I didn't really need to do that. I could have gotten here without getting rid of that thing, right? Because it's really just a state of mind and a choice that you're making. But I think, again, the companion is that, which we always forget, is to ask the Holy Spirit for guidance. And when you get to that place of doing and doing and doing and asking, the Holy Spirit goes with you wherever you go, because you are bringing your higher self, your right mind, the Holy Spirit with you wherever you go. You're trusting that that is where your divine guidance is coming from and no longer from your ego self.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that more than the reference to, say, somebody like Jesus, because that doesn't really work for me.
Well, and I think Jesus, again, is just another example of that, because who is Jesus? Yeah. Jesus is just you or me or any of us. But when he finally aligned with that Christ mind, which is where we're all headed, right? Which is the point of never going alone, because now you've got the mind of Christ with you. Then he became, Jesus, the Christ. And I think that was his whole message, was that I'm no different than you. You can do this because I did this, and I was a man, and then I did this.
So you could say that the mighty companions are all those that have realized that.
Yes,
Christ.
That Christ-mindedness. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, shall we continue on?
Okay.
All right. Let's get to honesty. All other traits of God's teachers rest on trust. Once that has been achieved, the others cannot fail to follow. Only the trusting can afford honesty, for only they can see its value. Honesty does not apply only to what you say. The term actually means consistency. There's nothing you say that contradicts with what you think or do. No thought opposes any other thought. No act belies your word. and no word lacks agreement with another. Such are the truly honest. At no level are they in conflict with themselves. Therefore, it is impossible for them to be in conflict with anyone or anything. The peace of mind which the advanced teachers of God experience is largely due to their perfect honesty. It is only the wish to deceive that makes for war. No one at one with himself can even conceive of conflict. Conflict is the inevitable result of self-deception, and self-deception is dishonesty. There is no challenge to a teacher of God. Challenge implies doubt, and the trust on which God's teachers rest secure makes doubt impossible. Therefore, they can only succeed. In this, as in all things, they are honest. They can only succeed because they never do their will alone. They choose for all mankind, for all the world and all things in it, for the unchanging and unchangeable beyond appearances, and for the Son of God and his Creator. How could they not succeed? They choose in perfect honesty, sure of their choice as of themselves. That was very powerful.
Mm. It's a big deal, honesty. A
Yeah.
very big deal. Mm.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Billy Joel's song, the first lines there. It's it's an uncommon value with most.
There's nothing that you say that contradicts what you think or do. No thought opposes any other thought. No act belies your word, and no word lacks agreement with another.
Yeah.
It's a tall order.
It is a tall order, right? It really makes you think like, oh,
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to acknowledge too that honesty, it starts with being honest with yourself. Sometimes it's easier to be honest with another person about their feelings or what you think about, pick a topic. But I personally know many experiences that I had, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, you're lying to yourself about this whole situation, how you think about it, how you feel about it, how you responded to it, because we make up these stories as we go along. So I just wanted to point that out too, that honesty, starts with yourself.
and also how many times do you sacrifice your own honesty in order to get through a situation, right? How many times have you not spoken your truth because you just didn't want to rock the boat, or you just didn't want to deal with the repercussions of, it's just easier to go with the flow instead of being honest with yourself. And then it builds and builds and builds until you have resentment.
Kind of like the last 4 years. I actually translated into physical stuff, where I would feel like a tightness in my throat, and because I was just holding back until I
Right.
did, and then I left that job. So
Sure. Do it in jobs, you do it in relationships, you do it, in friendships sometimes.
In Bill's writing in the Alcoholics Anonymous text, he identifies the fact that we have two opposed aspects of ourselves. One comes under the heading of guilt, which includes a lot of judgment and punishment-oriented thinking. And the other comes under the heading of pride, what he really is referring to is willful self-pride, which keeps us stuck in the other category of dealing with guilt and shame by blame, by pointing fingers, by finding fault, and so on like that. So what we find here about honesty is that as we begin to develop honesty, we begin to look at our lives under this microscope of honesty in the middle steps. And we begin to see my life was always unmanageable. Why did I start drinking? Was because it was unmanageable. Why did it become unmanageable? Because I couldn't have honesty. Why couldn't I have honesty? Because I was always in some sort of dilemma, some sort of frustration, some sort of condition that just eliminated the need for honesty, because it was better to tell a white lie, or it was better to go in a direction of avoiding people or whatever, which is not honest, of course, and many other things that undermine the ability to be honest with myself. So it does start exactly with who am I? Am I able to be honest with myself? It does definitely start with that. And just like the atonement and accepting of the atonement, it's for myself. When I want to accept the atonement for you, I'm misguided again. When I want to accept the truth for you, I'm misguided again. And this is where doubt becomes so difficult to deal with, because every time I deal with somebody else, their beliefs, their system of thinking, and so on and so forth, we can't agree on everything probably. And so doubt forms this dilemma, it forms this difficulty. It draws me into being again acting according to willful self-pride and pointing fingers and blame and shame and guilt and judgment and so on. And it draws me in, it draws me in, it draws me in again, until I realize, like, what am I doing again? Here I go. Now I have an unmanageable life again. Any obsession, in my opinion, leads back to the original obsessions that I couldn't handle. For example, alcohol or something along those lines of that I become obsessive about it. So honesty is really a key to opening the mind to seeing that I can't judge things as to whether they're honest or not, actually. The value of seeing honesty comes from the vision that shows me it's true.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we continue on with tolerance?
I just wanted to point out that the question that Freddie asked in the last question about who is the person that you're not going alone. Who is that you're going with? And is answered in this next. It's all of mankind, and it's you'll never they never do their will alone. They choose all of mankind, for all the world has in things. It's in number 10 and 2.
Yep.
That it's when you're not alone, you're with everybody.
Yeah.
We are everyone.
Yeah.
I kind of
Yes.
wanted to bring that up last time, but and then I says, no, that's kind of here nor there, but then it brought it up right up in this next section. So
It is awesome, Carl. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
And isn't that what it is, what it means to be in Christ's mind? To see all of your brothers as one, and isn't that what the at one-ment is?
you're never alone that way.
You're never
Yeah.
alone. All of mankind goes with you. I love that. Thank you, Carl. That was a great catch. All right, let's keep going to tolerance. Tolerance. God's teachers do not judge. To judge is to be dishonest. For to judge is to assume a position you do not have. Judgment without self-deception is impossible. Judgment implies that you have been deceived in your brothers. How then could you not have been deceived in yourself? Judgment implies a lack of trust, and trust remains the bedrock of the teacher of God's whole thought system. Let this be lost, and all his learning goes. Without judgment are all things equally acceptable, for who could judge otherwise? Without judgment are all men brothers, for who is there who stands apart? Judgment destroys honesty and shatters trust. No teacher of God can judge and hope to learn. Well, that was a tall order right there, huh? That goes back to what Tim said earlier about blessing everyone, right? Without judgment.
It's really, it's a really critical thing. I'll just chime back in on that, but that's what I use on myself. Well, what is that? What is myself? Myself is that which I think is other than everyone else, but I use it as a reminder. If I'm not feeling, if there's something disturbing, and I don't know what that might be, it could be anything. I just have to look at, is the way that I'm feeling, am I excluding anybody anywhere for any reason? Is there a political thing going on? Whatever. I mean, the newspapers and so forth are full of this junk. It's a real polarization. And every time we get drawn into that trap, we feel like we're getting a little morsel of news or something. And I read as much as anybody. And it's just like, you can read that stuff, but you have to be present with the fact that you're reading about something that really has no real truth and substance and spirit. And so, this book, you could literally walk away from everything and focus on this and just loving everybody. And the world just kind of falls away. I've had that from time to time, and it just, boy, it's the place I want to be. I keep getting pulled back for some stupid reason, thinking it's here in this world. Anyway.
Great share, Tim. Thank you. And didn't we just read that part? I think right in the beginning, we were reading about trust, and it said once you get to that place where you're at complete peace with the world, why would you want to go anywhere else? The world literally changes because you've created heaven on earth at that point. So I think you're right, Tim. Going down that path of forget this world, right? And just create heaven on earth, and within the parameters of bringing all your brothers with you in your mind. That's the goal.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It's so hard to not judge, though, to think, oh, well, maybe your way that's a little bit, maybe that leaves some people out. It's you got to be really delicate. Unlike a friend of mine who's been in the course a long time and with a lot of other counseling abilities that he's had, he's admitted to our group. He's like, I listen more, and I just tend to, when something I don't agree with is being said, I just look at them and smile. I don't say anything, and then by him not saying anything, it was just him and this other person, it goes away. And that person says, well, I'm getting hungry. You want to go get something to eat or whatever. And it's a pretty valid thing. I use that with some folks that test, my patience a little bit. And I find, hey, it works just perfectly. So anyway.
Yeah, good point.
I'm sorry, good.
No, go ahead, Eric.
Working with the world, it seems like it's important to notice that everything is temporary. So I see what I'm doing in the world, it's temporary. It will improve. Because I see it as temporary, it's actually helpful to me to see that it can improve. Seeing that I would be in the realm of, I'm the teacher of God, I understand what trust is, I understand what honesty is. I don't think that would help me, because it seems to indicate that's like permanent awareness or something like that. And I don't see my awareness as permanent awareness. I see it as it's on the screen. It's improving the screen. The whole screen itself is improving, but the screen itself is not the reality that I want to be in. It's on the other side of the screen. It's past that gap. That says there is such a thing as willful self-pride. Past that gap towards what's courage, what's true acceptance, what's true kindness. How does love increase? These are areas where I say that like that's the better focus to be on. Not what are they lacking, not why don't they see what's wrong with them and all that sort of stuff, but what is on the other side of that gap that says that's the right question to ask. That's not the right question to ask. So my screen is full of stuff dealing with what's wrong with everybody, and I need to see that my part is to see. I can help myself to eliminate all that stuff from the screen. It can be corrected by spirit if I can see it correctly, that it needs to be corrected, to use an easy word. So to be corrected, I can see it, but I have to come back into my, before all the senses separate into different senses. I have to kind of come back to that place where I know I'm the screen on which everything's appearing. Then I can see it much more clearly about myself.
Right.
It's honesty actually helping me clear the screen of confusion, conflict, and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because everything we see outside is really just a projection of our inner world. All right, let's continue on to gentleness. Harm is impossible for God's teachers. They can neither harm nor be harmed. Harm is the outcome of judgment. It is the dishonest act that follows a dishonest thought. It is a verdict of guilt upon a brother, and therefore on oneself. It is the end of peace and the denial of learning. It demonstrates the absence of God's curriculum and its replacement by insanity. No teacher of God but must learn, and fairly early in his training, that harmfulness completely obliterates his function from his awareness. It will make him confused, fearful, angry, and suspicious. It will make the Holy Spirit's lessons impossible to learn. Nor can God's teacher be heard at all, except by those who realize that harm can actually achieve nothing. No gain can come from it. Therefore, God's teachers are wholly gentle. They need the strength of gentleness, for it is in this that the function of salvation becomes easy. To those who would do harm, it is impossible. To those to whom harm has no meaning, it is merely natural. What choice but this has meaning to the sane? Who chooses hell when he perceives a way to heaven? And who would choose the weakness that must come from harm in place of the unfailing, all-encompassing, and limitless strength of gentleness? The might of God's teachers lies in their gentleness, for they have understood their evil thoughts came neither from God's Son nor his Creator. Thus did they join their thoughts with him who is their source, and so their will, which always was his own, is free to be itself. Gentleness.
It's pretty obvious that God doesn't judge at all. And so when we're using judgment, we are tending to make the error real. You know, the error is this world where we perceive all sorts of things that are worthy of judgment, but they're not real. They are the illusion that we are living in.
Right.
And by making if I identify even as this body, I believe I'm making this body real, but that's not the self I made is not the Son of God.
Right.
You know, this whole thing about judgment and making the illusion real is what keeps impressing on my mind. Not believing in the illusion, not believing in the things of the world.
Right.
Much the truth of awareness, you know, pure awareness, non non, what's the word? Can't think of it right now, but formless.
Yes,
Formlessness is my reality.
right.
Yeah.
And formless awareness, you might say, is the reality of all things.
Mhm.
But as soon as things become material and we start to identify with matter, we've lost the truth of formlessness.
Right.
And when we're judging the form, we are in the wrong mind
Hmm.
and making the form real.
Yeah,
Right.
good. Yeah.
I'm not very good at expressing it, but
No,
No,
that's
you-
exactly,
No,
that's
you're
exactly
doing
it.
very well, very well.
It's interesting. I was, I started reading that book. I can't think of it right now. Something about the light, Brennan, Hands of Light. And she was talking about, you know, it's A Course in Miracles talks about seeing light around all things. And I was baking some sourdough bread today, and I was looking at the bread, and all of a sudden I saw this like glowing halo of light around all the loaves of bread. And I was like,
Wow.
oh, that's really cool. You know, I got to that point, but it was interesting because in that book, she talks about how when she was younger, she used to spend a lot of time in nature, and just she had a lot of time to spend alone, like with nature and with animals. And I did too. I used to sit outside for hours and just with bird seed and holding my hands up, and the birds would come and land in my palms and they would fly away. And you know, you kind of lose yourself in that place of oneness with the feeling of just this love that surrounds you, right? It wasn't even that there was a bird, it was just the feeling of love and the exchange of love. And I used to get that a lot with my pets. I would even get that, like if someone would run a comb through my hair, I would feel this connection of deep love between me and the other person. When I was just a young girl, just that feeling, I don't know what it was, but I guess it was, again, the not associating myself with a body, or that it was a hairbrush or my hair. It was just the connection of the energy just coming into my awareness and going and coming and going, right? This flow. It's such a beautiful feeling when you can just let go and be a part of the gentleness and the oneness of all of it, and enjoy it, right? Like completely enjoy it, not have to describe it or define it, just immerse yourself in the beingness of the gentleness, right?
which is our true nature, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I spent a lot of my youth feeling, you know, being indoctrinated into the belief that gentleness was weakness, not that's the strength of gentleness, but the weakness of gentleness. And it was the being gentle meant you weren't powerful, that you didn't have it, that you couldn't be a part of the society because you're gentle, you know. And I might have not been successful a lot of the times with being gentle, but I've spent my whole life trying to be, regardless of what society tells me, and having it reinforced that the strength of gentleness is quite a because you have to be strong to be gentle when everybody else around you is not gentle. It takes a lot more strength to do that than it is to be Mr. Macho Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there is strength in gentleness, right? And it's like the paradox. It's like you have to be strong to be gentle, but really the strength comes from the gentleness.
Well, that's what I found. But
Right.
it's
Right. I feel like as you read A Course in Miracles, so much of it is a paradox. You see the paradox in everything, right? You see the paradox in, like, even the last thing we were talking about, tolerance, you know, it's such a paradox that to get to that place of strength is through this place of surrender,
Yeah,
right? It's just so
it's the
interesting.
whole contradiction of love and fear.
Right,
you know,
right.
If you, because the reason that I was strength, because what you were just talking about was the realization of the love of all things and everyone else. That's why I tried to be gentle to the earth and to other people. But to do that in a world of fear, you have to be strong.
Yeah, and you have to know yourself, right? I mean, I think that's the key. Again, the strength comes from knowing who you are and knowing what you are.
Or being really stubborn, which is I'm pretty good at.
Master.
Stubborn in your patience, huh?
Uh,
Yeah, maybe.
well, I think we've got time for one more. Let's continue on.
A good one.
And we'll read joy. We'll leave it at
Joy.
that today. Joy is the inevitable result of gentleness. Gentleness means that fear is now impossible. And what could come to interfere with joy? The open hands of gentleness are always filled. The gentle have no pain, they cannot suffer. Why would they not be joyous? They are sure they are beloved and must be safe. Joy goes with gentleness as surely as grief attends attack. God's teachers trust in him, and they are sure his teacher goes before them, making sure no harm can come to them. They hold his gifts and follow in his way, because God's voice directs them in all things. Joy is their song of thanks, and Christ looks down on them in thanks as well. His need of them is just as great as theirs of him. How joyous it is to share the purpose of salvation.
I think the reason that joy is the feeling of gentleness is because the joyful or the gentle have no fear.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They feel safe, loved, and protected, and so others feel safe, loved, and protected in relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says gentleness means that fear is now impossible. And what could come to interfere with joy?
One place it says that joy and love are the same thing. So a whole lot of the population has suffering from fearful avoidance, the difficulty of seeing themselves in company with others that they overcompensate for, usually by some sort of personality traits that make them sort of endearing. And they tend to not see that their problem is that their fearful avoidance gets in the way of that connection. Even though they can establish it, they can't seem to be able to maintain it. And so they find themselves in anger and frustration half the time and feeling like a victim. And then they find themselves, joyous and free in their mind the other half of the time. And I'm just saying half the time because they sort of split it between the two. I don't know if it's really half, to tell you the truth. But I know I spent most of my early life in fearful avoidance. And it gave me skills, that's for sure, which I still can use some of them. But it also put me in a situation where I couldn't be honest with myself. So for me, drinking came sort of naturally because I could stay with that peaceful, happy self when I was a peaceful, happy drunk. And I could stay with that and be entertaining and funny and whatever. And so that was my cure for a long time. When I couldn't do that anymore, then I found myself sort of stranded. Because now I was seeing people and saying to myself, well, no wonder I never trusted people. No wonder I never believed that this life was like worth anything and so on. I would tell myself stuff like for the first couple of years, I would tell myself all kinds of things like that. And I would read literature and be very faithful to reading it and very faithful to being able to teach it to somebody else or something like that. But I sort of didn't believe in it for the first couple of years. And I sort of started saying, I never trusted anybody. It was more important to me to say I never trusted anybody than to believe that I could trust people. So it took me a long time to see fearful avoidance and fear tends to make trust impossible.
Mhm.
And it also makes something even more important impossible, which is to see everything as perfect the way it is, which is one of the main functions of the Holy Spirit's special function of love. So we can see, in fact, that everything is perfect the way it is, really as it is. As I see it, it's perfect the way it is. What I can't see, therefore, if I don't see that, is that I'm not seeing it as perfect the way it is. And that's my problem to deal with, nobody else's. And that's why I don't trust anyone, if I don't trust people still, because I don't see it as their responsibility to straighten me out. I see it's mine and I'm failing at it, perhaps, but I still see it as it's my responsibility to accept atonement for myself. Gentleness is on the other side of that. It's not on this side of failure. It's on the other side of success, the other side of the screen. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
I
Those, Eric, those are hard things to say. I mean, I've been on here quite a while and listened to you, many times and appreciative of, your efforts and the truth that you've brought out. But, I mean, it is another thing. It's a bravery, I guess you'd say, to be able to really speak. This is what I've been doing. This is how I spent my life, and we've all done that. We've all gone down ridiculous paths out of self-preservation, let's say, and learned to argue really well. That's one thing I can do. I can actually talk the legs off of chairs. Almost. My wife will swear to that, but I mean, God, so I win the argument because I've worn you down. I mean, is that, that's a very small glory. It's like, I don't know what the analogy would be to that. But anyway, getting back to it, on the side of the ego, there's really nowhere to hold. We try to grasp little things, we'll get out in nature, and that's very, very beneficial, is to get out of ourselves by doing something in nature and not being inside. But in our pets and so forth, like you said earlier, Terry, and very, very helpful there. But it's in our discussions and in the reading of the course that it brings back the memory so many times. It makes it alive again. And so what's happened in my life, the life of this guy that's whatever, is that I have begun measuring my responses in, is this an ego thing, or is this a spirit thing? Am I feeling good to where everyone is benefiting, or is it just for me or my family or something? So it's that inclusivity, I guess, is the word, that if I don't discriminate against anyone, which is really hard to do, it's really hard to do when we're having wars where innocent people are dying, and or they're just going into spirit sooner. That seems unfeeling, but there is no real destruction. Yeah, you miss them and all that, but again, it's a very fine line. We keep buying into the world, buying into our bodies, into our egos, into our art or music and all that, and beyond all that, there's just this presence of God that's within us that constantly sustains us, that there's no stop. There's only us that stops. So anyway, I'll get off my little teeny soapbox.
But no, that's true. I mean, it's easy to get pulled into the world, especially with the news and all the things that we're watching. And, you know, we try to stay on the right side of things, right? Instead of, you know, being pulled into areas where we feel like we're supporting someone who's being barbaric or vicious. But at the same time, it's just about getting ourself at that place of peace, you know, and all of the distractions are pulling us into and away from ourself. And again, it's the paradox. To heal this, I have to heal this. And we have to keep bringing it back to healing this, healing this, healing this. Being in the world, right? But not of the world. Doing the work, walking the talk, being a teacher of God by doing the inner work, and then just showing up in that place of gentleness, in that place of peace, in that place of tolerance. And, you know, like Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. And that goes back into all of these things we're reading right here today. Tolerance, gentleness, joy, trust, honesty, right? If we can heal all of that in all of our relationships, then effectively we will be at that place of being at heaven on earth. If we do the work, right? Because the more we get distracted with out there and, but this person, oh, and that person, and oh, what about this person over here? Now we've lost it. We've lost the whole focus of the work, which is going inside and sharing it from being it.
Highly sensitive people tend to be noticing the change in energy, the shift in how they feel. And that's a good thing. But on the other hand, it does tend also to keep them down below that barrier of, you know, of their own self-will and judging things accordingly to how they feel. And see, this isn't really what was helpful to me, to see that I could judge things according to how I feel, because it still brought to mind a lot of judgments about people and their situations and circumstances, which made chaos and confusion instead of making peacefulness. So a lot of people get stuck there. Like on Facebook, I have a place for empaths to learn about themselves. And one of the things that they need to learn about themselves is don't be so highly sensitive to everything that happens. Don't believe that you have to be changed by that energy that you feel in somebody else. Don't believe that. Feel yourself getting freed of that instead. So this need to feel peaceful is not what comes first. It's what comes as a result of recognizing that I see the need to be able to connect with you in some kind of higher truth instead of some kind of place where we need to commiserate or we need to share our victim story, which makes us a victimizer in our own minds as every time we share it. So that's just another point similar to that. A lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people feel gentleness as a result of giving up all that frustration and confusion and difficulty and contradictions in how they feel, how they believe they feel other people. If I believe I feel other people, and yet I can't connect with their inner peace, with their inner truth, and I'm not really feeling what I need to feel. Again, I'm looking at what's valueless instead of what's valuable.
Yeah. Good.
All right. Well, anybody else have anything else they want to share before we close this week? Thanks everyone for joining. hope you're enjoying this. I do post the lessons every day in my Facebook page. If you want to chime in, feel free. We can discuss over there anytime. And I will see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
All
Yeah,
right.
thank you,
Thank you,
Jen.
everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.